Hello everybody, and welcome back to another video. Today is August 24th, 2023, and last night we had the first primary debate for the Republicans. It was a very interesting night. At the time of me filming this, it's 13 minutes after the debate ended, so I just saw the debate. I'm giving my live reactions to it, just fresh, and I'm going to be going through the candidates, the winners and losers, who did what, who performed the best, who performed the worst, and what this means for the race going forward. We're going to get right into it right now. I haven't made a script for this video. I haven't outlined anything. I'm just going to go say what I feel, say what I noticed during the debate. I took notes on it. I watched the entire thing, so I do have some references, but I want to just talk about my immediate takeaways, just straight, complete thoughts, raw thoughts on this debate. So, the first thing I want to say is that I think we have to assess performances based on previous circumstances. If you're polling at 1%, you're going to need a lot more than if you're polling at 35%. And so for that reason, I'm going to begin by calling Doug Burgum and Asa Hutchinson the two biggest losers of tonight's debate. Now, I know they might not have had the worst individual performances, but both these guys are polling below 1% nationally. They both barely fit the criteria to make this debate, and they both really had a lot of trouble breaking through tonight. Again, didn't necessarily have too many bad moments. Hutchinson got booed a few times because he was arguably, besides Christie, the most critical of Trump on stage. And Doug Burgum, he stumbled over his words a bit. I do that too, so I can't get too mad at him, but he certainly could have done better. But neither of these guys had a bad night. However, they needed a breakthrough. They needed something that could introduce them to the American, specifically the Republican electorate in this country, and neither of them got that or even came close to it. The closest I can maybe say would be Doug Burgum when he grabbed the American Constitution. He had a pocket copy of it under his sports jacket. That was maybe a good moment for him. But again, did it do much? I don't think so. Of course, I could be wrong. Maybe this resonated with a certain sector of the Republican Party. I don't think it will. I think that both him and Hutchinson had a bad night. I think both their campaigns are clearly headed nowhere. Obviously, they were really in a tough spot to begin with. I wasn't expecting anything different, but it's always unfortunate when you had a chance to make a moment and you didn't get that. So that's my first kind of take that I noticed. I'm also going to go talk about the man who I think was the most interesting tonight, Vivek Ramaswamy. Ramaswamy had a very, very polarizing night, to say the least. I think he made a lot of people very happy. He really was getting a lot of cheers, but he also, I would say, made some enemies. And I think of all these 8 candidates on the stage, he took the most heat, specifically from people like Mike Pence, Chris Christie, and Nikki Haley. So before we get on to those candidates, I do want to talk about Ramaswamy and just his performance on its own. Vivek Ramaswamy is the most Trumpy person on this stage. Obviously, without Trump, I think he kind of took up that lane of being the populist, America First messaging guy. And that is really interesting because, again, Ramaswamy was not known to me until a couple months ago. And, I'd imagine that's the same for most Republican voters. So he is certainly a new figure. He has had a lot of momentum. He's been surging in the polls as of late. In some polls, he's even ahead of Ron DeSantis. But I think tonight was not the best for him. I know a lot of people really were saying that this is going to help him, but I disagree. I think that his interaction with Nikki Haley was especially harmful to his campaign. We'll talk about Haley in a second, but I think she particularly had a good night. What I will say is that, to me, Vivek Ramaswamy needed a moment that was entirely his. He, had memorable moments, but they weren't good. They were getting attacked by Chris Christie. They were when Haley, really hammered him on foreign policy. And when he was just slammed by saying, "Look, you don't know anything but foreign policy," and it shows. You've had no experience in foreign policy, and it shows. That's a bad look. Again, Vivek Ramaswamy, I'm sure he made some people happy tonight. I don't think he made enough people happy. I don't think that he has a lane to the nomination. He's doing fine in the polls. I respect that. I think he's going to get a good amount of votes. Doesn't have a lane to victory, and I think tonight proved that. He has his base, but with Donald Trump in the race, there will never be enough voters for Ramaswamy to win by taking anti-Ukraine stances, by really going all in on the climate change. He, in the beginning of the debate, he said he thinks the climate agenda is a hoax. Again, you can interpret that whatever way you want. I think, to me, that's a pretty polarizing statement, and I think it was not what he should have said. I think he could have taken a pro-coal, pro-fossil fuel stance without going that far. I think that he hurt himself tonight. He was really benefiting from surging and being perceived as a smart, rational Trump choice without the baggage of Trump. I think he's still going to have a lot of support. I think maybe people are going to like him more, but it won't be enough. And I think that in general, tonight proved to me why Vivek Ramaswamy is long-term not a viable option. Again, we're still early. It's still only August. In August 2015, Jeb Bush still had a lane to the GOP nomination. Ben Carson was surging. We didn't, Ted Cruz is doing fine. We didn't expect him to do as well as he ended up doing. So I think Ramaswamy's momentum for now is real. I don't know if it'll last, through the new year, through the weeks approaching the Iowa caucus. So to me, this night was not what he needed, and I'm going to say that this was a slight loss for him. I think he made a lot of people happy. I think he made more people angry, and I think he effectively shut off his ability to contribute and win over voters from other ideological camps of the GOP. Now, someone who I think started off strong, but, closed, not so sure, Chris Christie. He began really well. He attacked Ramaswamy. He said, I'm already getting tired of, listening to a guy who sounds like ChatGPT. I don't know what that means. I didn't really think Vivek Ramaswamy sounded like ChatGPT. What I will say, though, is that I think that was a good way for Christie to get into the debate. He's, been very well known for having good one-liners. He's a good debater in general. He has had moments where he's slammed campaigns, and really, I'd argue that he really did some pretty considerable damage to Marco Rubio's 2016 campaign. But tonight, beyond the Ramaswamy moment, he didn't really land too much. He had a good moment where he talked about why he went to Kyiv and the impact of what he saw. He, in pretty graphic detail, described what Russia is doing within Ukraine. I think that emotionally connected with a lot of the people in that room, with a lot of Republican voters. I think it set up Nikki Haley to attack Ramaswamy better, but I don't know if he really broke through. I think he, stuck on message. He did the same stuff he's been doing all for the past few months about Trump, saying, look, he's indicted, his conduct is below the office of the presidency, all that stuff works well for the people that support him. I don't think he expanded his base, and I think for that reason tonight, maybe a slight loss, not to the extent of Burgum, Hutchinson, or even Ramaswamy, but I do think that he really just had some opportunities and didn't make anything of it. Definitely not, a game changer that goes against him, but certainly there are things he could have done better. Now, another guy who I think is kind of in this range is Tim Scott. Tim Scott had a decent night. He had some good moments. I think he started kind of like Christie. I think he started off strong. He had a good closing statement, but in the middle he kind of got lost. He didn't talk for stretches of the debate. I'd say the least memorable performance maybe behind Burgum and Hutchinson, and that's mostly because he really didn't have a message. Haley was clearly the pro-interventionalist, pro-Ukraine, pro-establishment candidate who's going to go on the attack and defend traditional, moderately conservative values. Ramaswamy's the Trump guy. Christie's the anti-Trump guy. Mike Pence is your classic, just very conservative person who, really seems to respect the Constitution, really seems to value the fundamental pillars that have built this country, right? I'm sounding like a Mike Pence campaign ad. I don't mean to sound that way, but he does. That's what he's trying to do. Tim Scott, I don't really know what it was. He went into the culture war stuff at the end. He said, he mentioned how, biological men should only play men's sports. So he was clearly trying to get into that, trying to tap into that lane of the GOP's electorate. I think he also tried to work with that when he talked about abortion. I think he was one of the more conservative people on stage when it came to abortion, but I don't think overall that he really was able to do that. I think that was more someone like Ron DeSantis, who was, had the culture war lane from the get-go here, and I don't know what Scott's strategy is, if I'm being honest. I think he had some good moments. I think he didn't cause himself any damage. I think he's in a fine spot going forward. What I will say is that to me, DeSantis is still that guy, and Scott did not take that away from him tonight. So to go over to DeSantis, I think actually didn't do that bad. A lot of people were really saying he disappeared, he wasn't good. I think DeSantis, he has been cratering. He needed to, just to prove in general that he's not going to flop. And I think he didn't do that. I think he had moments where he was awkward. I think in the beginning he really was tensed. I think if you looked at him, this happened to Doug Burgum too. Burgum tripped over his words a bit. Obviously, you can't fault him for that. I'm someone who has a natural stutter, and I do that too. I always, hope that element of my speech isn't too obvious in my videos, but it's something we all do, and it does come with nerves, but some of it is also within your control, and I think for Burgum that happened, and for DeSantis that did too. I think he had a kind of an awkward smile moment where he looked at the camera, kind of had a delayed smile, which I thought was a little weird, but in terms of the content he put out, I think it was not bad. I don't think that he necessarily hurt himself too much. I think he proved that he's not just going to go away. A lot of people really hate what he did tonight. I don't think it was that bad, if I'm being completely honest. I think he could have done more, as he, certainly could have, or as almost anyone could have. But to be clear, he's just someone that I really, really was not expecting much from tonight, and he exceeded my expectations. He stayed on message. He didn't really get into it too much. He, in a lot of the complaints with DeSantis, said, people say he's uncharismatic, that he's kind of a whiner, that he doesn't really offer anything positive. He talked about the minimum wage jobs he's worked. He's talked about the successes he's had in the state of Florida. And I think overall it was not a bad night for him. So going forward, I think there's things they can work on there. For sure, it was, definitely not an amazing showing, but it's better than what I think a lot of people are expecting. It's better than what he's been doing as of late. So DeSantis, I'd say probably in the upper echelon of tonight, especially compared to where his poll numbers are and where they've been. So that leaves Mike Pence and Nikki Haley, who I think are the two biggest winners of tonight's debate. Pence, I would say, we'll talk about next. He's just someone who I think really stuck on message. If anyone wins the on-message award for tonight, it's Mike Pence. He was calm, collected. He got into it a few times with Vivek Ramaswamy. I get that. I think that actually helped him. I think it, really positioned him well to, just say, look, I am conservative. I am pro-life. I am very socially traditional. But at the same time, I'm not a firebrand like Vivek Ramaswamy is. I'm not someone who's going to say all these things that are going to alienate moderate voters. So I think from an electability standpoint, I think it was a good night for Mike Pence. I think in terms of appealing to Republican voters, he had a fine night. He actually did a really good job of not staying away from the. What I was surprised by was that I thought he'd go after Trump more, but I think he deemed that was not the way to go, and I think that was smart. We saw Christie and Hutchinson get booed at times when they kind of went after Trump, but again, when you look at how that worked out for them, or how it's working out for them in the polls, they're both not doing too great, Hutchinson specifically. But to go back to Pence, I think he did a good job of stressing his ties to Trump. He said multiple times, the Trump-Pence administration did this, the Trump-Pence administration did that. When I worked with Donald Trump, we got the country back on track. So he didn't, really ever compliment Donald Trump directly, but he also never went, he never went against him, and he also made a point of really not touching the January 6th stuff. There were opportunities where if he wanted to, he could have said, look, Donald Trump got me in trouble. He lied to the American people, but the powers that I had, which is true. Mike Pence did not have the power to decertify election results. He was only there to just, kind of check the box. So Pence, if he wanted to do that, he could have, but I think he made the right choice and he didn't do it. So he gets, if we're grading a B+ or an A-, I think he did a very solid job tonight, or last night rather, and he, going forward, I think knows how to stay on message, which is the principled conservatism and tying himself to Trump without, going too much into it. So that leaves Nikki Haley, who I think is the unambiguous winner of tonight's debate. She did a really good job. I wasn't expecting her to do as good of a job as she did. She's qualified. She's had experience in this lane before, but I did not think that she would really seize the opportunity the way she did tonight. She hammered Ramaswamy on foreign policy. You could tell it was personal to her. I think she mentioned multiple times that her husband has served and is serving in the U.S. Army. She actually made a really emotional statement, and I thought this is pretty powerful, if I'm being honest, about how she dropped off her husband recently at 4 a.m, saw him and his other counterparts packing up their duffel bags to go serve in a country that they had never been in before. That is a good statement. I think it's bipartisan. I think unites both parties. And again, this isn't a presidential debate, it's a primary debate, but she was able to unite, I think, Republicans, Independents, Democrats without appearing to be a rhino, without, really going against Donald Trump. And that is effective. She didn't mention Trump once, or she did. She talked about the deficit a little bit, but she didn't go into the January 6th stuff. She didn't go into the indictment stuff. She actually raised her hand. She said that she would support Trump, even if he is, I believe, found guilty of his crime. I don't remember the exact word they used, but it might be incarcerated. But she said she'd support Trump, and that's a big moment for her too. I was not expecting that. I thought she'd be a bit more on the fence about it, but she really played her cards right tonight. She stuck with Trump when she had to, but she didn't really, talk about him and defend him in any way. She didn't tie herself to him when the charges and indictments came up. And she also was able to be her own person. I think she established herself as the clear choice of the establishment with this debate performance. I think she did a really good job of, hopefully for her, persuading maybe moderate voters, especially on issues like abortion. Again, we saw Republicans weren't even that fired up about abortion. We saw some pretty moderate stances being taken on it, specifically from Haley. That didn't really get her in trouble with the audience. So tonight, I think she did everything she could do. I think she gets an A rating. And I was surprised by her. I'm not going to lie. I was expecting her to do a very average to slightly below average job. she did well. So if I'm Nikki Haley, I'm pretty happy with tonight's debate performance, and I think that she is going to see a bit of a bump in the polls. Now, does it matter? That's the most important question. I don't think it does, if I'm being honest with you. She's at 4%, Trump's at 52%, Ramaswamy's at like 11%. So there are people on the stage who certainly are ahead of her, and I think that it might only help her to a very small extent. But that being said, it's still important to have a good debate performance. And maybe, just maybe, she can get some momentum, maybe have another good debate performance, maybe get some good polls. Then she'll be up in the upper echelon of candidates. Either way, though, I think Trump's still the clear favorite to win the GOP nomination. I think that him not debating was smart. I think it distanced himself from the rest of these candidates. It said, that he thinks he's above them, which in terms of the polling, he absolutely is. And so tonight, Donald Trump might have been a winner too. So those are my brief thoughts. Again, I didn't make a script, so I might have been all over the place here, but I hope I did a good job kind of just transitioning, segueing between these two candidates, or these 8 candidates, between candidates in general. So again, if you enjoyed my analysis, leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you all in the next one.